Hey friends, Kim from stampingimperfection.com. I'm so glad you're here today. Make sure you subscribe while you're here and click that bell so you get notifications every time I upload a new video. I wanted to share that I got the Field Notes kit from Tailored Expressions, and I thought it was kind of expensive when I saw it, but I loved the stamps inside it. So when I got it, I was really delightfully surprised. I didn't expect it to come in that beautiful bag. I love when companies sell you something and they also plan how you should organize it. So when it came in that really nice heavy duty plastic zipper bag with a pretty sticker on it, I was very excited about that because I love it when somebody helps me figure out how to organize something. Like, I need all the help I can get, really. So I was looking at this and debating because I thought it was pricey, but now that I've used it, I'm so happy that I got it. I almost didn't get it. It came with 3 stamp sets, and this is really amazing. This is called the Rough Draft Background, and I love it. It's not supposed to be like this perfect piece of graph paper, and I have so many ideas for how I want to use this. I've been doing a lot of mixed media for the last several months, and I'm looking for stamps to give me texture and pattern and all that. It came with those envelope seals that you saw that came with the package of those. And then the second stamp set here is called Field Notes. It's got just quite a variety of things that, sentiments that I can use on cards, but other things that I can use in like my traveler's notebook and in scrapbook layouts and mixed media projects. And then it came with the beautiful Sketchbook Florals that have like 5 sentiments and 3 gorgeous florals. And it also came with those 2 sets of stencils, which are like masking stencils, so they're pretty great. I also bought a couple separate stencils and a couple separate background stamps just because I love this one for mixed media. I love the open stars because when I stamp that, then I can watercolor in those stars. And who doesn't love a crafty background? I can stamp that and cut those out. And I love ordering from Tailored Expressions because they always send you a receipt in this envelope, and they always send you a freebie. Sometimes it's a little die, a lot of times it's a little stamp. So I love it. And that stamp said, "You rock." So I want to make a mixed media background, and I also know I want to make some cards, and I want to do some watercoloring with this kit. So I've got a lot of stuff, and this is like a 30-minute video. I'm going to show you. I end up making a mixed media background that I'm going to use in an art journal that I'm creating, that I'm going to bind together when I get enough pages. And I also want to make some cards. So since I've been doing all the mixed media, that's what I want to start with. So I'm just starting with a regular piece of 110-pound Neenah cardstock. So I was trying to decide, am I going to use this matte gel medium or should I use gesso? And I've got a couple different kinds of gesso, but I'm going to use this Crafter's Workshop gesso. I used up all my Vicky Bouton gesso. So I have this other gesso I got around the same time. I wanted to try out some different brands, so I just pulled off the lid and then I spread that gesso all around. When I do mixed media, my hands are just a mess, and so I don't want to waste what was on that lid, so I just spread it on my paper, and I took my palette knife, and I'm doing this because I know that I know at the very least there will be some watercolor on this and lots of ink. And I've been experimenting a lot lately with the different mediums that I can put on paper and then add my other mixed media over them, just to see how they behave when I use them with different products, like gesso, like the matte gel, like texture paste and all that stuff. So I put that gesso all over it with the palette knife, and I tried not to do it perfectly. I wanted texture and I wanted some spaces without gesso, and I let that dry overnight. And then I just pulled out some ink colors and started just adding them on with my blender foams. These are blender foams from, these are the Tim Holtz ones. And I'm using my Distress inks, and I haven't had I didn't get Distress anything until the oxides came out, and then I like them so much that I decided I would get the Distress inks in little mini cubes. And I'm glad I did that because they're different than the oxides. The color is very intense, and they blend beautifully. Not as beautifully as the oxides, but you can do so many fun techniques with both the Distress oxides and the Distress inks. They're water reactive, so there's just so much you can do with the water. So I'm using iced spruce, evergreen bough, peacock feathers, pine needles. So I'm just blending it on, and I really like the peacock feathers in there, so I think that blue is a really pretty touch with all those different shades of green. And I know these work well together because they are analogous colors. If you look at the color wheel, they're next to each other on the color wheel. And those spots that are coming out really dark are the spots that did not have gesso. The gesso actually causes the ink to sort of hang out on top. It takes a while to dry. So when you put one color down and then add another color, the second color sort of pushes the first color out of the way. They don't really blend on that gesso surface, and I kind of like the effect I get. And then when it dries, then you can do other layers of that ink again if you want to, or you can do other layers of other techniques and other mediums, which is what I want to do. I'm just experimenting with how different mediums behave and what they do on top of other mediums, and I am just really having fun with mixed media. Like, mixed media makes me very excited to be super creative. And so I'm just pulling this out, and I'm going to give that a minute to dry. So before I put this aside, I just take a pencil and I'm going to write down the colors that I use so that I remember, because I love this combination. I really love the way this came out. So I actually let it dry, and then I squirted it with some water using my distress sprayer, and I blotted that up with a paper towel, and I got those big white spots, and I'm loving it at this point. So now I'm pulling out my stencils because I just got a whole bunch of stencils from Stencil Girl products, and I want to try some of them out. Like, I love the stencils I picked out, and I ordered some big ones. These are two completely different stencils, and I'm going to put them side by side. This is going to be, that paper that I'm creating here, this background that I'm creating, is actually going to be scored down the center, and it's going to make 2 pages in my art journal. And they probably won't even be anywhere near each other. So I start out just by squirting some water on the stencils, and I'm taking another piece of just regular cardstock, and I've gessoed a whole bunch of cardstock. So I had like 10 sheets, and I'm just using my brayer to blot up all that ink that spread out. And then I'm going to just use that same piece of paper to pick up what's left there. And I'm going to then take my stencil and, just using my brayer, run the brayer over those stencils that I use to get any excess paint from the stencil onto that paper. Because I have learned from all the mixed media classes I've taken from all the different instructors, they do not waste that ink. They always have like an extra art journal next to them, or they have a piece of, paper, whatever kind of paper they're using. I happen to be using gessoed cardstock, so I had a spare one. And I'm also working on this second background, and the only reason that I'm showing you this is because that paper that I'm blotting things up with is going to become another pretty beautiful background actually, and it's going to have some purple and yellow on it, and this is where that came from. And I don't know why, I felt like this looked like a night sky. I felt like it looked like a big sunflower. Like, I really felt inspired making this particular piece. I was making several pieces at once, and I'm showing you this one because of the techniques. I did these same techniques on the other one, and these are some Stencil Girl stencils that I ordered. I just wanted to try them out. Stencil Girl is all over Facebook, and I wanted to try some of their stencils because they look fantastic, and it turns out they have all different sizes. I love them. Look how beautiful that comes out. This is like a water lifting technique. I'm just squirting through a stencil, and then I'm lifting and getting this beautiful pattern, and I love them. And I'm going to take those stencils and blot that extra paint off, and I'm getting some pattern right on top. And notice that I'm just blotting it right on top of all the other pattern. And I forgot to mention that I did let this dry. This dried in between, so that bottom layer dried from the last time I did it, and then I'm putting this wet layer on, and this will have time to dry before I do anything else with it. And I love the colors that are coming together on this paper. Like, this is not terrible. So, pay attention to this paper throughout this video, because that paper is going to turn into the background for 3 cards. This is actually the original background I started with, and I have to say, when I put the stencils down and did that water lifting, I was so disappointed because it took so much of the color off. I regretted using such large stencils, so I want to put more layers on. When I took a couple classes from Seth Apter, he was always saying, you're only 1 layer away from a really beautiful background. So I just wanted to put like pieces of that grid background on there, and I'm using this gold metallic ink from Encore, and I like this ink. I've had this ink pad for a long time, and I always get good results from it. And I'm trying to stamp this at different angles, and I'm going to do this in 3 parts. And notice that I brought that other paper back in, and I'm stamping it in a way that I'm also getting some of that gold on parts of that background. And I love this. I immediately felt like this improved this image. So I'm using my heat gun here and drying everything. Like, I'm doing a layer, drying it, then doing another layer. And then I dry that layer, and then I do another layer. Because if you don't let the inks dry, then when you put something else on top, they will mix and blend together, and I didn't want that to happen. I wanted to preserve the layers that I had there. So, I already like this better, so I think I want to try one of these stencils that came in the kit. And I pulled out this gorgeous Dusk ink spray from Altenew. It's an iridescent spray, and I hated this immediately. Like, I felt like I ruined the whole project. I just wanted to throw it away. And I took that stencil, and I wasn't going to waste the ink because I'm a mixed media artist and we don't waste ink. So I'm putting that onto that scrap piece. That's how I'm thinking of it, the junk piece. And I don't hate that so much, though. I like the way that came out. And so I'm just going to clean the rest of that off there. And I'm thinking, oh, how am I going to save that? I put it aside to dry, and I'm going to let it dry. I could have dried it and then blotted some of the ink up, and that might have been interesting, but I'll figure out something. And, oops, I'm going to dry it a little bit and probably blot it a little bit. But it still isn't. I'm sorry my hand is in the way there. I was really having a lot of trouble with that cord. I don't know why. My heat tool isn't in a good spot at the moment. So I did blot a little bit of that up. And then I'm pulling out an Altenew ink, and this is the same color as that spray. This is the Dusk. It's a color I love. This is a dye ink. So this works just like those distress inks. Those are also dye inks. So I'm pulling out a couple of the stencils I got. I love the script stencil. I love that circle stencil. I don't have anything like that circle stencil in my stash. So I decided I'll go around the edges because I love this particular color. And I am trying to somehow save this piece and make it something I love. And I did put a bunch of splatters on there. Like when I sprayed that ink, it got all over that paper. So you can see those splatters. I like those off to the side and above that big like rectangular splatter. So I'm still thinking, what am I going to do to fix that big blob? And I decided, you know what, there's other stamps here. If I can't save this, it's okay. I'm going to experiment with other things that I have, because I recently got those stencils and I recently got the rest of this whole kit. Let's play with it. So I pulled out the Field Notes stamp set, and I love this dot one. Like, I love this dot. I think that's a great stamp for mixed media backgrounds. It's all about texture and pattern and color and layer upon layer upon layer. Like, I definitely, for someone who is, a mixed media artist and does it for a living and sells their stuff, I have not put enough layers on this at all. But I'm using a permanent black ink on top. This is a pigment ink, not a dye ink. And then I pulled out another stamp, and this is a little like square one, and the squares are all interlocked. So I stamped that a few times, and I quite liked that little stamp. And I thought, that's okay. I'm good with this. I love the stamps in this kit so far, And of course there's the calendar stamp, and then there are a bunch of sentiments, and then there's a little like date tag stamp. So I'm just cleaning up my stamps, and I like those little details that I just put in. It feels like they're missing something, and I'll figure it out eventually, but I really do like them. So I also know that I want to use the gorgeous flowers in the third stamp set in this kit, the Sketchbook Florals, and I will actually stamp those onto watercolor paper. And I'm going to stamp each one of them twice onto watercolor paper, and I will watercolor those. I'm not going to show that in this video because I really want to show you this background. Like, this looks like a freaking hot mess. I get it. So I'm stamping this big, tall, I don't even know what this flower is supposed to be. If it's supposed to be a flower or, a stem of leaves. I'm just stamping it all over the place. And, trying to like that big blue blob that I have there. So I'm just going to stamp. That's what I'm doing. And I like this particular one because it feels very, botanical. So I put that aside for a while, and I did my watercoloring. I did 2 of each one of the florals that they have, and this was before I quite finished them. I did them, I let them dry, and then when my husband came in, I asked him what he thought, and he was like, yeah. And I felt that way myself about them, but because I didn't feel like I made the parts that should be shadowed dark enough. So I actually took them and took a black colored pencil and shaded in more, and I like them so much better. So this is what I was considering, that scrap piece of paper that I was blotting up all the ink. I'm picking parts of this that I like, and I'm cutting it down to different sizes that I'm going to use on my I'm going to put them on some card bases, and then I'm going to put those stamps that I watercolored and die cut, because the kit came with the dies for those florals. So it really, in the end, this kit really is an excellent value for me, because this is just the first of many projects, and I'm telling you, I spent 2 days playing with this, just making these, and I enjoyed the experimenting. There were moments where like it was heartbreaking because when I blotted up all the ink and then when I sprayed and got that big square, it was like, oh, I just ruined it. I loved it and I did this layer and I hated it. And how do I save it? And I don't know if I exactly did save it, but it's been such a great learning experience that it was so worth doing this. And this is just ink and paper. If I trash all of this in the end, that's fine. It's just paper. It's just a little ink. It's just a little paper. It's a little bit of my time. My time is free. So I've cut down a few pieces. I'm just laying these on and trying to decide. And I cut out a bunch of those little hello. That little tag shape die came with the kit. So you got the 3 floral dies and that little tag die. And I made a bunch of those little hello florals. And I stamped them all on watercolor paper and watercolored them. And everything goes back into that handy little bag. Love that little bag. And it's a super sturdy little bag. So now I took some Altenew jet black ink spray, and this doesn't spray. I don't know why I can't get that bottle to spray, but it makes great splatter. I put that aside to dry. That took days to dry, literally days. Then I splattered it with white gouache, watered down, and that took days to dry, but I liked that detail, the splatter detail. So I'm just attaching the card panels from that piece of junk paper to black cardstock and navy blue cardstock. And actually I think it's all navy blue cardstock. And I'm just using my double-sided tape, and then I'm going to use some foam for the flowers, and I'm going to pop all those flowers up, and then I'm going to put one of those little hello stickers on each one of these. And I cannot tell you how much I love these cards. Like, that paper was just to mop up the leftover stuff, and I ended up really loving this background. And I got 3 completely different backgrounds from the same sheet of paper. I probably could have gotten more if I'd like just cut the paper, but I was kind of selective about where I cut the paper so that I got the best parts of the pattern. And I mean, look at the one that I'm working on now. That's pretty fantastic. It actually, that stencil really allowed me to highlight that center rectangle, and then the ink spray around the edge, like if you look at that, it sort of deepened the color patterns of the layers below it, and I love it. I love the way this came out. I didn't put any like more splatter on this. That might have looked nice if I'd done the black and white splatter on these panels too, but I was really thinking this was just a piece of junk paper. But then I decided I'm going to use this. I've got extra florals stamped, and I'm going to use this. So I'm going to, finish off all 3 of these cards. And I love this double-sided tape, by the way. I got this from scrapbook.com. This is like, it's not an inch, but I think it's 3/4 of an inch, this particular one. And this is just a smaller panel that I did. And each of those blue panels, those navy panels, is 1/4 inch wider and 1/4 inch longer than whatever dimensions I cut those other panels at. So I've got 1/8 of an inch all around outside of my mixed media panel of navy blue. And I really like that navy blue behind it. I think it looks really good on that white cardstock. And I'm really just putting a lot of foam tape because I spent a lot of time watercoloring these, and I'm really happy with the way they came out. Like I really enjoyed doing it. Watercoloring, you can turn on the TV or not, turn on some music and just enjoy yourself. And I love it. Watercoloring and Copic coloring are probably some of the most relaxing parts of mixed media that I think I do. Now, aren't those cards gorgeous? Like that was the leftover ink that I used to wipe up with the paper towel. And look at it. Those cards are beautiful. Maybe you don't think they are, but I think they're gorgeous. Like the patterns are so random and interesting. I would never be able to reproduce that piece of paper because it was just so randomly created without any thought whatsoever. And I love that. Like the piece of junk paper is the paper I like the most. Although I have to say that purple and yellow one is gorgeous. I've been trying to decide what I want to do next to that because that needs to be taken up a level. And I just did an interesting matting here to this. A little bit of blue on one side, a little bit more on the other, none on the top and the bottom. And again, with the foam tape, I'm adding more. And I did put some black splatter on the watercolor flowers when I created them, but I did it with the Distress ink. I used the black soot Distress ink and then dried it with my heat gun, so just the outside of the drop was dry, and then I blotted the rest because I love the way that looks. That is something I learned from Vicki Boutin, and I think it adds such a beautiful touch that I do it to a lot of my projects now. It's just one of my favorite techniques for a top layer or the top 10 layers. I think it's just really interesting. So I'm just finishing off this card and I'm putting the flower here on the other side. And I used my Altenew watercolors for these. And I had such a great time coloring them. Look at that. Like, look at all those cards. Just amazing. I also want to show you what I did with that background piece that I was creating for my art journal. You'll notice that there's a lot of color there now. I took my watercolors and I filled in the stamped images that I stamped. I filled in those overlapping squares. I filled in the florals that I stamped, and I really love the way that came out. I think that actually kicked that whole piece up a level. And then of course I put a few of the die cut florals that I watercolored on top, and really I was trying to camouflage that big square that I didn't like in the middle, and I actually quite like it. I think when this becomes 2 pages in my art journal, it's going to be 2 pages that I really love, because I am going to remember that I had a wonderful afternoon creating this, or wonderful several afternoons creating this. And I think you can see that you just keep adding to the layers. You let one layer dry and then you do the next layer, and you can do all kinds of different things to those layers. I've got gesso, I've got distress ink blended on. I used water to lift some of the ink. I used more ink to stencil some stuff on, and then I did some sponging around the edges, and then I used more ink to stamp things on into ink spray, and then I did some ink splattering and paint splattering, and I just kept adding layers. I even stamped in gold metallic ink, which I think is a beautiful detail on a layer, on any piece. I think it's just a little bit of metallic just really pops on a piece like this. And this of course will be scored down the middle, so I'll have 2 different pages there, and I'm so excited about how this turned out. I'll no doubt take the back of this and put gesso on the back of it and create something on the back of it so that the back is also finished. I'm not sure what that'll be yet, but I'll be very careful when I do it so that I don't damage this. But I really love the way that this came out. I feel like this was a real mixed media experiment, and I feel super excited about it. It's not by any means perfect, and a couple times I wanted to trash it, but I'm happy that I didn't. I kept thinking about what Seth Apter says about you're one layer away from magic. So, if you don't like it, add another layer. And that's what I kept doing. I just kept adding another layer, and I took ideas from classes that I've taken from a lot of different people, and I'm going to keep doing that because it was a fun experiment. And then I ended up with these 3 cards with what I consider to be a junk background, and I love them. I love the way they came out. These make me so excited to keep creating because I did things on there, like the background was completely unintentional. The watercoloring was very intentional. And when I pulled out that black watercolor colored pencil and added some shadow details, I felt like I improved my images so much. So for me, this was a real learning experience because this was just something I was experimenting with myself. I was doing a lot of things that I learned from a lot of different people. And if I compared my watercoloring and my mixed media projects from this point to a year ago or to 2 years ago, I see huge growth in what I'm creating, and I see huge growth in the skill that I'm using to create the projects with, and I'm creating stuff that I love. I created stuff I loved a year ago or 2 years ago, but now it's at a different level, and I feel like I've learned so much. Just since January, I've learned so much from all the Facebook Lives, all the virtual workshops, all of the classes that I've taken online. Like, it's just been incredible. And so many of those mixed media artists and designers are like sharing their time freely online. So take advantage of it because you'll create some things you love. And I'm so delighted that I bought this kit, and I know that I will be using this many, many more times in the future because I absolutely adored it. I adored every part of it. And I just know I want to watercolor those flowers some more. And absolutely, I'll be creating more mixed media backgrounds. And that grid stamp and those dots and those overlapping squares are going to become parts of many backgrounds in the future. And I also know that the sentiments will become parts of cards, and the other stamps will become parts of my traveler's notebooks and my art journals. So like this is money well spent for me. And again, this is the Tailored Expressions Field Notes kit. And I think it's the second kit that I've seen that they had. They had a snowman kit in July that looked quite cute, but I thought, that's kind of pricey, and I am on a different budget, so I did budget around this kit this month, and I'm so glad I did because I know I'm going to get every penny's worth out of it, and I'm super excited about it. And I have to say, I'm super excited about mixed media and where it is allowing me to go. For me, this has been like the whole mixed media journey has been a real it's almost been like therapy because I was so burned out when I retired in December, being surrounded by 3,000 people every day. I genuinely needed time to hunker down and just be by myself with my husband and just create and immerse myself in something that required nothing from me but my time. And it's been amazing. I feel like my soul has healed. It's filled me up. I hope you find something that does that for you too. Thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. And also make sure you subscribe and click that bell so you get notifications every time I upload a new video. I so appreciate that you stayed until the end, And I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you feel inspired to do something creative today.